Before I get into the video, I apologize about my sunglasses because the sun is like literally in my face and it's way too bright out here. So, welcome back to the comprehensive guide to geometry charts. This is part 2 of 2. If you haven't seen part 1 of this guide about bike fit, I highly recommend that you go and click that card above to go and watch it, because this is part 2 of 2. Like, you don't go and eat a pizza starting at the crust unless you're a monster. When you go to a manufacturer's website or when you ask somebody how a particular bike rides, they'll probably say things like, "It's a bit too twitchy for my taste," or "the frame has great road feel," or "yeah, that's a really responsive bike." I don't know about you, but I don't really know what the heck that means. Now, if my girlfriend were more responsive, I would know what that means. I'm just kidding, she doesn't exist. Ladies. All those seemingly nonsensical words will give you a rough idea of how a bike rides. But if you're comparing how track bike A will ride to track bike B or C, they're all going to ride responsively. But if you're a more sensitive rider, all those words that we use to describe how a bike rides largely comes down to centimeters of difference in the geometry charts. Of course, the best way to know how a frame set handles is to give it a test ride, but this isn't always possible. The next best thing you can do is learn how to read those geometry charts and really understand what those numbers mean when it comes down to handling. And in this video, I'll teach you how to do just that. Just a little disclaimer here, geometry charts can only tell you so much about the bike and give you an idea of how it handles. And geometry charts will be more useful if you've ridden more bikes. So without further ado, let's demystify those numbers. We're going to take a look at 3 things today. First is trail, second is bottom bracket height, and third is the chainstay length. Hold on to your hats because I'm about to throw a lot of nerdy bike terms at you. First up is the trail. Now, the trail isn't something that's usually given on geometry charts, but it is super important for how a bike handles. The trail is the distance that the contact patch of the front tire trails behind the steering axis of the head tube. The trail indicates how quickly the bike will steer. So first off, the steering axis is this imaginary line that goes straight through the head tube, and the contact patch is where the tire meets the road. The amount of trail that a bike has depends on its fork, rake, and head tube angle. Now, the legs of the fork don't just stick straight out of the head tube. They're offset forward, which is called the fork rake. Alright, so here's how trail affects handling. As you increase a bike's trail, the bike will want to ride in a straight line. It will feel more stable and it will be less sensitive to the input on the handlebars. You're going to have to steer a lot more in order to turn more. Bikes with more trail feel more stable and they are easier to ride no-handed. But at the same time, maneuverability and cornering takes a hit. If you decrease the trail of a bike, the opposite happens. The bike quickens up in the steering. It becomes more sensitive to input on the handlebars. You won't have to turn the handlebars as much to turn your bike. This results in better cornering, but at the same time, the bike might feel a little less stable, especially at high speeds and during descents. As you increase the head tube angle and increase the fork rake, you will decrease the trail and quicken up the steering of the bike. I know this is kind of confusing. You increase the fork rake, you decrease the trail. Contrary to popular belief, track bikes actually have very slow steering forks, with around 28 millimeters to 35 millimeters of rake. On the other hand, road bikes have reasonably quick steering forks with around 45 millimeters of rake. But because trail is a product of both the fork rake and the head tube angle, because track bikes have really steep head tube angles, they need to offset that twitchiness with a slow steering fork. So if you put a road fork onto a track bike, it is going to feel super twitchy. Most bikes have around 50 to 60 millimeters of trail, and a lot of people tend to like around 57 millimeters of trail to balance that stability with handling. And you can find how much trail that your bike has by looking up the geometry chart of it and plugging in those numbers in the trail calculator in the description. The next measurement is the bottom bracket drop. The bottom bracket drop is measured from the horizontal axis straight through the bottom bracket to the horizontal axis through the rear axle. It gets kind of confusing here. The smaller the bottom bracket drop measurement, that number, the higher your bike will sit off the ground. I know, right? Like, geometry is crazy. I gotta be in it. So the lower that a bike's bottom bracket sits off the ground, in other words, the larger that bottom bracket drop measurement, the bike will feel more stable and it will ride more confidently while descending, but it does risk pedal strike. On the other hand, a higher bottom bracket, in other words, the smaller number bottom bracket drop measurement, will give more pedal clearance for tight corners, which is especially important for fixed gear riding because you can't exactly coast through the corners. Along with that, a higher bottom bracket will make the bike feel more sprightly and more nimble, which is part of the reason why fixed gear bikes are so fun to ride. Track bikes have a pretty high bottom bracket to prevent pedal strike on a banked velodrome. Most track bikes have around 50 millimeters of bottom bracket drop. In comparison, road bikes have around 70 millimeters of bottom bracket drop, meaning that they are significantly lower than track bikes. And the third number on our list that affects handling is the chainstay length. This is the chainstay. How long it is the chainstay length. It's measured from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the rear axle. Most track bikes have around 400 millimeters of chainstay length, whereas most road bikes have around 410 millimeters. Ricky, who is a cyclocross bike, has 420 millimeters of chainstay length. Shorter chainstays make a stiffer bike, but how stiff is stiff enough is still up for debate. With shorter chainstays, you'll also be able to feel more input through the pedals, and you'll be able to feel more of that acceleration. And with the shorter total wheelbase, the bike will feel snappier. Longer chainstays, on the other hand, will make the bike feel more stable. They also give you more heel clearance for rear loads, like if you have panniers, and they also give you more tire clearance, which in turn affects the comfort of your bike. The cool thing about horizontal dropouts on single speed and fixed gear bikes is that you can effectively change these characteristics by moving the wheel forward or backward in the dropout. So those are some important numbers to look at in the geometry charts to understand how a bike handles before you even ride it. There's a trail, the bottom bracket drop, and the chainstay length. So hopefully now, after watching this video, you can take a look at geometry charts and just kind of nerd out about how a bike rides. Part of the reason that track bikes are so dang fun to ride is because of their aggressive geometry, with high bottom brackets, steep head tube angles, and short chainstays. It makes them really good for mashing and whipping around. And now that I'm mainly on a cyclocross bike, there is a part of me that misses just that pure fun factor of track bikes. But Ricky is just so dang comfortable. What's your riding style, and how does your bike's geometry help or hinder that? Leave a comment down below. And if you're new to the channel and you like fixed gear bikes, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button so you can have fixed gear videos sent straight to your sub box twice a week. And if you want to stay updated on the channel, follow me on these socials. I am on Instagram, Twitter, and Strava, so check me out on those at Zach Y. Gallardo. And then maybe we could be friends, like social media friends, not real friends, because we haven't met. At least most of us haven't met. And with that, I will see you all in the next video.